Om Badram Karanebihi Shrunyamadevaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Ryajatraha Sthirair Tushtuvam Sastanobihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastina Indro Vridrashravaha Swastina Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastina Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Bruhaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti 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 Yo antah pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akhila shakti darasvadamna anyam shtahasta charana shravanatvagaadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रणम्यान् शिरसगुरून् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथा भूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks who have joined for the 35th session of Mundaka Upanishad. So as you know, we've been doing Mundaka Upanishad Chintana for about a year now, and we are just over halfway through this wonderful, wonderful Upanishad of Atharva Veda. Okay, so we are in the second Mundaka and we are in the second Adhyaya, Dvitiya Khandaha of the second Mundaka. And what is the primary focus of this? It is the primary focus of this particular section of the Upanishads is contemplating on the Antaryamin, that being that is inside us. We are different from this body, right? We are the jivas, and inside the jivas is this Antaryamin. And that is the contemplation or the focus of this particular Upanishad. So before we dig deep into this, who are the rishis, Atharva, Angira, Satyavaha, Angirasa, Shuanaka, and all the acharyas who have given us the bhashya. So let us thank them and not forget the great knowledge that they have brought it down to us through this Upanishad. Then we have the Aksharanamaka Paramatma is the Devata for this particular Upanishad, and you have Chandas, Anushtup, and others. So we have done 4 verses so far. Avihi, Sannihitam, Guhacharam Nama, Mahatpadam, Atretad, Arpitam, Yejat, Pranat, Nimishat, Cha, Yad, Yetad Janata, Sadasadvarenyam, Param Vijnanat, Varishtam Prajananam. This guy is inside you as your Antaryamin. Why is he there? Not only controlling you as your Swami, but this guy is so graceful that he's actually waiting for us to see him. We don't do it, but he is always available for us. We have to make an effort to see him. So he is ever manifested, Avihi, as our Antaryamin. But it is us who are not making an attempt to actually dwell deep inside to see him. Yeah. But what is the root of seeing him? What is the mechanism of seeing him? Angirasa gives a bit of a caution here, isn't it? Yad archimat, yad anubhyo anushta, yasmin lokaha nihitaha lokinashta. So this guy is bigger than the biggest, he's smaller than the smallest. And even if you take the Agni as the Madhyama Akara, you can't throw, say, for example, an arrow into an Agni. If you throw an arrow into Agni, the arrow is just going to get burned. How are you going to throw an arrow into something that is smaller than the smallest? How are you target an arrow into something that is bigger than the biggest? So there is a problem there. How are you going to see him? Tadetat aksharam brahma sapranaha taduvang manaha tadetat satyam tad amrutam tad vedavyam somya vidhi. Okay, although this guy is so difficult to target using our material things that we have at our dispensation, still Angirasa says he has to be known, he has to be seen. That is your only way to salvation. Yeah. Tadetat satyam tad amrutam tad vedavyam. You have to know him. So those Satvika Jivas who want to attain salvation, their only route for them is to know who? Know this Antaryami. So how do we then do this? Dhanurgruhitva Aupanishadam Mahastram Sharam hi upasa nishitam sandadita Ayamya tadbhava gatena chetasa laksham tadeva aksharam somya vidhi. So here, Angirasa, we have dealt so many sessions on this, but one should never feel tired. Avrittihi asakriti upadeshat. Veda Vyasa has told us that we need to revise again and again. Srimad Acharya says one needs, if one has studied the Upanishads and the Vedas at least 12 times, if one has heard the Upanishads and the Vedas at least 12 times and he has understood something, then it means he's actually understood something in the Upanishads. Yeah. So just reading once or just thinking about once doesn't make us experts or even true seekers of Vedic philosophy. We have to revise and revise and revise. So here in these two verses, Angirasa very clearly has said, if you want to know this Paramatma who is inside you as your Antaryamin, there are two stages, Angirasa. There is something called Paroksha Jnana and there is something called Aparoksha Jnana. The first step is the Paroksha Jnana. Paroksha Jnana is using your material indriyas and to gain some knowledge through the Vedas. That is the first step. So this Supreme Paramatma can be known only through the Vedas. Your perception and inference will not give you knowledge of Paramatma. Perception at this point is material perception, looking at material things through the material indriyas. The inference is also based on logics of the material perceptions that we have. But how are we going to be seeing something that is totally non-material? Yeah, this is a big challenge for all of us. But our rishis have constantly in the Upanishads given us the root for this. What is that root? Dhanurgruhitva Upanishadam Mahastram. Use, if this is a yuddha, if this is a dhyana yuddha, and you have to target this Paramatma who is inside you, you need to have a bow, you need to have an arrow. The bow is the Upanishads. The arrow is your mind. The arrow should be very sharp. Only then it hits the target, right? How are we going to sharpen this arrow? We sharpen this arrow by constant Shravana, Manana, and Dhyana, concentration. We have completely sharpened this arrow. And with that sharpening of the arrow through Shravana, Manana, and Dhyana, what has happened? Tatbhavagatena. So we bring in bhakti or devotional service here. Okay, so with this, Ayamya, pull the arrow to your ears, listen to the Vedas, Shravana, Manana, Dhyana, leading to Bhakti. Then you release this. Lakshyam, who is that Lakshyam? Tadeva Aksharam, who is inside you. That is the first process where you get the Paroksha Jnana of what is it that the Upanishads are saying? What is it that the Vedas are saying? We at least need to make a journey of a million miles, as the Chinese proverb says, starts with the first step. And our first step towards this journey is actually make an effort to hold this bow and arrow. 99.9999% of people out there, they have not even lifted the bow. They have not even put the arrow on the bow. Okay? They are completely lost. But it's only those sattvika jivas who, for whatever punya that they have done in the previous janmas, they eventually gravitate towards an intention to learn the Upanishads, an intention to know the Upanishads and the Vedas. So, for those of us who are in this satsang, we all have to feel quite grateful to Paramatma for actually making us actually come to this point and start thinking about the Upanishads. Okay. So that is the only route, says the Atharva Veda. Dhanurgrihitva Upanishadam Mahastram. That is the biggest weapon. To start off with the Paroksha Jnana. So that Paroksha Jnana starts with the first step. Then we take 998 steps. So we have reached 999 step, let's say. Okay, that is the number of steps that we need to do, which is the Paroksha Jnana. And that needs to go deeper and deeper and deeper, because our Purusha Shukta, if you remember, we did Purusha Shukta, we did a session on, we did several sessions on Omkara, we did sessions on Gayatri. Yeah. So all these are foundational for us, because that gives you the whole idea of what the philosophy of the Veda is. And the hero of the Veda is who? This Purushottama or Paramatma. He is the hero of the Vedas. And to know this hero, who this person is, what are his qualities, what greatness does he have, what has he done for us? To know all this, we have to go through the Vedas. And all those ideas are compressed in this Pranava. So Angirasa says, after you have read all the Upanishads, all the Vedas, as much as you can, as per your capacity, then you come to Pranava. Start focusing on the Pranava Vidya here, as described in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Pranavo danuhu sharohi atma brahmata lakshamuchyate apramattena vedavyam sharavat tanmayo bhavet. So it is in this verse we understood that the 998, 99th step is Omkara Upasana. And in the Omkara, understand the Paroksha Jnana. Because all the Upanishads that we have read is crystallized in the Pranava. So then you start Shravana, Manana, Dhyana of the Omkara. Using first your material mind. Then as you do the deep meditation, when the mind becomes still, the Jiva Swabhava itself is open. And the Indriya of the Jivas, the eternal mind of the Jiva itself, then starts contemplating of this on this Pranava. Pranavo Danuhu, Sharohi, Atma. There that Atma is the Jiva. Brahmatal Lakshamuchyate. And this process is has to be done very, very carefully, says Angirasa. Apramattena vedavyam. If you don't have the clear focus, you're going to miss your target. So with great care and attention, do this process, move from paroksha jnana to aparoksha jnana. When the jiva swabhava sees the antaryamin inside, okay, that is our let us say that is our 1000th step. Okay, in this samsara, we are still in this samsara. We have taken the 1000th step, which is the aparoksha jnana, where we are actually having bimba rupa shakshatkara. We are actually having a glimpse of our antaryamin. Okay, for the high devatas such as pranatattva, chaturmukha, and so on, these guys are constantly having aparoksha jnana of the paramatma or antaryamin who is inside them. And that paroksha jnana comes, gradation of that comes down and down to you and me. We might just have a lightning flash of who this Bimbarupa Shakshatkara is. Okay? But that process is essential, says the Upanishad. So this is not made up by somebody in the Vedantic system. This is the rules of the Upanishads that Aparoksha Jnana is the primary step before you reach liberation. Once you've had Aparoksha Jnana, liberation is given at some point once you've completed your prarabdha karma. So these are all the clear systems that is divided in the Vedantic system, and there is no shortcut to it. Anybody who thinks it is a shortcut is, I'm afraid, misleaded. This is the Vedic process of liberation. So next the question is, if this is the Antaryamin, how do I know him even more? So this Dhyana Yuddha, as I told you, is the Omkara Upasana, isn't it, which leads to it. And this Omkara itself we did last week. The shape of the Omkara itself is like the shape of a bow. And last week we did the whole understanding. We said, let's take 10 aspects of Omkara. We have done all that. Concept of God. It talks about the Supreme Being. It tells us about his infinite auspicious attributes. He's got no defect. He's Jnananandamaya. He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. He creates, maintains, destroys the universe. And he is omnipresent in everything at all time, in all places, including in this Pindanda and in the Brahmanda. And he can be known only through the Vedas, which gives us the concept of God. So that is what the whole Omkara Chintana or Upasana is all about. And, there are so many things that we have spoken about, but if there is only two things that you want to kind of memorize and think about Omkara, two aspects. Gunapurna, that this Paramatma is an abode of infinite, auspicious, non-material attributes. Okay? He is Gunapurna, no dosha, no dosha dura, completely dosha dura, no doshas. And Omkara also gives you an idea of Sarva Veda Pratipadya. The whole of the Vedas talk only about him, and that is compressed in Omkara. Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti Tapamsi cha Sarvani Yad Vadanti Tad Ichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti. Okay, that is what our Yama has taught to Nachiketa. And then Tadde Bravimi Sangrahena Om Ityetat. That is what Nachiketa was taught in the Katha Upanishad. Exactly the same thing that we are talking about. And again, I again and again come back to this. The Samanvaya of the Shastra is absolutely 100%, provided we are able to understand it in that perspective. If we don't understand Samanvaya, it is our problem, not the Shastra's problem. Shastras always say the same thing. Not just the 5 sentences, but the whole of the Vedas, they talk about and celebrate this Paramatma. So Om, we understood, is is this entity. And I've told you he's Gunapurna and he is Sarva Veda Pratipadya. So what are the further characteristics of this entity? So now Angirasa goes a little bit more and gives a lot of metaphors. Yeah, Rupa Alankara, as it's called. Angirasa is amazing. And of course, the Vedas, Upanishads is full of metaphors, isn't it? So in this particular verse and the following verses, and the following verse, Angirasa gives us a lot of metaphors for us to understand who this person is. Yeah. So the next verse, which is new for today, Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Votam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi Tamyeva Ekam Janata Atmanam Anyavacho Vimunjata Amrutasya Esha Setuhu. Okay, this is a very, very popular verse of Mundaka Upanishad. Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham cha Votam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi Tamyevaikam janata atmanam anyavacho vimunjata amrutasya esha setuhu. Memorize this. It's a beautiful, beautiful verse. So what does this say? What is he saying? You are, so in the previous verse, Angirasa has said, go deep inside and try and understand your Antaryamin. Who is this Antaryamin? He is not only inside you, but he is somebody who is all pervasive everywhere. Yeah. Yasmin Dhyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Votam. So that is why understanding that Omkara Tattva and its etymology becomes very, very important. If you remember, in a couple of sessions before, we did, if you take Omkara as an Akhanda Shabda, what is the meaning of Omkara and Akhanda Shabda? There is the Avadatu and Uyidatu. And the Uyidatu, Votam, Uyate iti Om is Votam. So here when Angirasa says Votam, Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Votam, that Votam there is what? Uyate iti Om, that which holds the universe together, supporter and controller of the universe. So he is illustrating this now, after talking about the Omkara. So once we have understood the Omkara, we can understand the greatness of this Paramatma as how he is the Otam of what? Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham. So what is Dyau? What is Antariksham? What is Prithvi? Let's think about this. So Dyau is the heavenly system, heavenly planetary system where all the Devatas are there. Okay, that is a very, very brief understanding of what Dyau is. Dyau is where the Devata Lokas are there. Antariksham is that space between the Dyuloka and the Prithvi, where we are, that is the mundane Jivas. We are in this Prithvi Loka here. Okay, that is Prithvi. And then you have the Antariksham, which is in between. So that is in this particular cartoon. Here, if you take sun as Dyau, and the Prithvi is the land on which we are, and that space in between is the Antariksham. You got to expand this idea, okay? Our rishis are not just stopping at this level. They want you to think about the 14 lokas, which forms the whole of the Brahmanda, right? The 14 petal lotus on which Chaturmukha Brahma is sitting, that we are all very familiar with. So we got the Prithvi Loka. Then we got the Swargaloka and all the others up to Satyaloka. Then you have all the Patala Lokas. So all these things in the space, they all form the Antariksha. What does this guy do? He is the Otam. He holds all this. He's not only your Antaryamin, but he holds all this. Okay, who wants to do chapter 7.7, please? Which is a very popular verse in our satsang. Anybody wants to do Gita 7.7, please?
Okay, I'll go with that.
Yeah, go for it.
Mattah parataram nanyata kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre maniganaiva.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Veena ji. So, protam, look at that word, protam. Okay, pra-otam. That is how you split it. Prakrishta, otam. Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Votam Mayi Sarvam Idam Otam. How? Sutre Maniganaiva. So if you bring that Gita verse and this Mundaka verse first line, it fits in very, very beautifully. And again, we got to do Prasthanatraya in action, isn't it? So we've looked at a Gita verse. This particular mantra, Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Otam Manaha Saha Pranashta Sarvaihi, is an important verse in Vedanta Sutra. Okay, Vedavyasa has actually done as Adhikaranam, Dibvadhyaya Adhikaranam. Okay. Divyadhyayatanam swashabdat om. Om muktopasripya vyapadeshad om. Om nanumanam atachabdat om. Om pranabhrucha om. Om veda vyapadeshat om. Om prakaranat om. Om stityabhadanabhyam cha om. Yeah. So many sutras, 6 sutras, yeah, that Veda Vyasa has done to settle this particular verse. Okay, so he has given a lot of importance to this particular mantra of Mundaka Upanishad. So for those of you interested in exploring Vedanta Sutra, which is the rank #1 of the Prasthana Trayas, go and check out these 7 sutras. That is the Vishaya Vakya. For that is Yasmin Dyau Prithvi Cha Antariksham Otam, that which holds all this, the whole of the universe together, is this Otam. Okay, now when you look at Omkara, of course, Akara, Ukara, Makara, that is what it is, isn't it? Bhuta, Bhavad, Bhavishyat, Bhur, Bhuvas, Suvaha, Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, and all the other lokas up to Satyaloka and all the other lokas up to Patala. Which is the one that Otatvachihi Omkaraha Uyate iti Om? Is this Omkara, which is Akshara Namaka Paramatma. So this concept of Antariksha, Dhyau and Prithvi, you will see that it comes again and again in the Upanishads. There is not a single Upanishad that doesn't talk about these concepts that are intuited by our rishis. Look at our famous Hamsa Gayatri of Katha Upanishad, which we have done before and which we all like reciting. Yeah. Anybody wants to recite the Hamsa Gayatri in this satsang, please? Anybody wants to have a go at it? Hamsa Gayatri of Katha Upanishad, where Yama taught Nachketa, or where are all the places where this Paramatma is? No problem.
I can have a go.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Hamsa Shuchi Sat Antariksha Sat Hota Veti Sat Athiti Drona Sat Drushat Sat. Sorry, can't read the making it bigger. Shruti Sat Vyoma Sat Abja Goja Rutuja Adrija Rutam Brahat.
Thank you, Nitaji. Very well done. So, very, very well done. So, look at the first 3. So, there are 18 entities that Yama describes here where this Paramatma is. Okay. And he starts off with Hamsaha Suchishat, Vasu Antarikshasat, Antarikshasat, Hota Vedishat. So, again, it is the same. Dhyau is Hamsaha. Antariksha is Antariksha. Vedi is Prithvi. It is, this Vedi is a Kunda, right? Kunda is in Prithvi. Okay. So, again, the Hamsa Gayatri talks about the same thing, that this Paramatma is in all these areas. Dhyau, Antariksha, Prithvi, by definition, which means all pervasive. Look at our Purusha Shukta that we have done. Nabhyam Asid Antariksham, Sirshno Dhyau Samavaratada, Padmyam Bhumim, Dishaha Shrotat, etc. etc. So again, Purusha Shukta of Rigveda also always talks about this Antariksha, Dhyau, and Prithvi. So we just need to get this in our mind. What it implies is that you use this as an example to understand and contemplate that this Paramatma is everywhere in this Brahmanda. Okay? And he controls. So hold on to that concept that he is the supporter and controller of the universe. Okay. Now, this is where the idea goes very interesting in the next line. So when, for example, you have the Otam here. So when there is a word Otam here, you link the Otam to the left and you also link the Otam to the right. Okay. So the next word is Otam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi. Okay. So this guy is a supporter and a controller of not only all these Antariksha, Prithvi and Dhyau, but he's also Otam for what? For this Pindanda. And for this Pindana what? Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi. Okay, so that is beautiful. He is Otam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi. Okay. So Otam, we understand, supporter and controller of the universe. Universe includes this Pindanda, right? Controller of everything. Manaha, very easy. Mana means mind. Here is a tricky question. Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi. Okay, so who is going to tell us? We have done this prana upasana. I mean, this prana in this context, prakarana. Look at the contextual relevance here. What is that prana that is being described by Angirasa here? I've given a clue from Mundaka Upanishad 2:1. So who wants to tell us what is that prana that is being described here? Anand, go for it.
Is it the manas?
So manas is already described in the previous line, Anandji. Otam manaha saha pranashta sarvaihi. So it is mind and other things. And he says all the pranas also sarvaihi. All the pranas also. So
All the indriyas and manas.
very good. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So well done. Good answer, Anand. So all the indriyas. So prana, there are various etymologies and understandings of prana. Of course, in this context, what Angirasa is saying, all the pranas. Yeah, and we have understood, we have done this Mundaka Upanishad. Remember, we spent 2 classes, I think, doing this. Sapta pranaha prabhavanti tasmat, sapta archishaha, samidaha, sapta homaha, sapta ime lokaha, yeshu charanti pranaha, guha shayaha, nihitaha, sapta. Beautiful verse of that. So, sapta pranaha, the pranas, they are all the indriyas. So this entity is not only out pervading and controlling and supporting Dev, Antariksha and Prithvi, but this one is also the supporter and controller of your mind and all the indriyas that you have in your pindanda, that is your sadhana sharira. Yeah. Dvadasha va eta pranaha. Kaundinya Shruti Acharya gives a reference for that. The Srimad Acharya gives a reference for us to understand what that prana is. Dvadasha va ete pranaha. Okay. Dvadasha is 12. But here what is being specifically discussed is Jnana Indriya Pekshaya Saptatvam. The 7 Jnana Indriyas are discussed in this particular verse, which we understand and bring it here. Okay. And in fact, there is a Brahma Sutra that talks about it. Om Saptagater Viseshi Tattvacha Om. So go and check this out. So this Sapta of Mundaka Upanishad, and again, Mundaka Upanishad, that is one of the reasons why it's a very important Upanishad, because Veda Vyasa brings so many Vishaya Vakyas to settle, to settle doubts that one may have around the understanding of the Vedantic philosophy. Okay, so that is why again Mundaka Upanishad becomes very important. So that Vyasa brings so many of these mantras into his Vishayavakya. So why is he saying that? This is interesting. This is where I am getting at. Okay, why is he saying that? So in the previous verse we said that this guy is the that we have to become this this bow and arrow, and we have to use this bow and arrow. This bow is the Upanishad, this arrow is the mind, and then we pull it, you do this and that. There's so many things he has said. But in the very next word, he said, Yasmin Dev Prithvi Chantariksham Otam Manaha Saha Pranashta Sarvaihi. He is the controller and supporter of everything. So then in that question, are we in control? Yeah. So he has said previously, look, you take the bow, mate, you take the arrow, you put ayam yatadbhavagatena, you stand there, you dress well, you be a nice warrior and you do this yuddha. If I now decide and say, okay, I want to do this dhyana yuddha today, is it going to happen? Are we actually in control? Are we actually in control to do even our sadhanas? Okay. So this is another, deeper philosophies of Vedanta that probably with the rest of the class, we might have an interactive session around this. Okay. Are we actually making a decision to do this also, this dhyana yuddha also? We are supposed to fight against this enemy in a loving way. And are we in control doing this? Look at the Keno Upanishad, Talavakara Upanishad of Samaveda, which hopefully we will do next. Look at the very first verse of that, where Chaturmukha and Rudra are having a conversation, and Rudra is asking this question. Rudra is supposed to be the Abhimani Devata of the Manas, right? And this Rudra is asking Chaturmukha Brahma this question. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha, kena pranaha pratamaha preti yuktaha, keneshitam vacham imam vadanti, chakshuhu shrotram kaudevo yunakti. Shrotrasya Shrotram Manasa Mano Yad Vachoha Vacham Savu Pranasya Pranaha, says Chaturmukha Brahma. But in the very first verse, Rudra is saying, how does this mind work? Who is the controller of this mind? Rudra, who is the Abhimani Devata itself, is asking this question to Chaturmukha. How, I mean, my mind is going everywhere. How can I control this? Who is controlling this mind? Okay. So, here if you take Otam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvai, that gives you a clue that there is somebody else who's controlling all this. Yeah. Who is that person? So, in this particular figure, we had this person who is holding this bow and arrow, and he is pulling this arrow in the string up to his ear, and he is hitting on this in this target, right? So there is this us. This is supposed to be you and me who have the sadhana sharira, and we are using this bow and arrow to hit this target, who is our antaryamin. We are doing an action here. This is an action. Yeah. To spiritual effort is an action. Yeah. If somebody says spiritual effort is not an action, they must be insane. Spiritual effect is a sadhana. It's an action. Yeah, the question there is this the action of the soul, or is it the action, is it the mind stuff? What some monastic philosopher says, antakarana. Is it the antakarana or the mind stuff alone that is doing the action, or is it the soul that does? Okay, so we have to think about that and then try and appreciate the depth in which Angirasa is talking to us in this particular verse. So I put a question mark there. I just want to start off for us to think about who is the doer here. Okay, is it the soul or is it the body that is the doer? So who wants to take this up first? Any contributors here, please? Anand, yes, Anand and then Prakash. Yeah, Anand.
So the soul is the doer. The body is material. It's inert object. The body, inert object hasn't got the doership. The soul has got the doership.
Thank you, Anand. Excellent. Prakash ji?
I also allude to that. I was also wanted to say the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Prakash ji. So this is a basic problem of philosophy. Okay. So if there is a conscious effort to do a particular action, here it is a conscious effort where somebody is holding a bow and using an arrow and pulling the string and then hitting the target. But this is a conscious after. In fact, it's not a stone rolling down the hill. It is a conscious effort that somebody is doing. Okay. There itself, there is a difference. Our monastic philosophers will say the jiva is a non-doer. Forget about the jiva. The jiva actually does not exist. It is only this nirguna Brahman, which is a non-doer. It doesn't do anything. It is an inert entity. So that there itself, there is a big issues around Vedantic philosophy. Whereas the other schools will say, no, mate, it is the soul that is the doer. Mind is a jada. It is non-sentient. It is made up of this pindanda. Pindanda's evolute only is mind. That cannot have an ability for self-initiated action. It is only the conscious beings that have self-initiated action. We have discussed this so many times. We have to bring it here because when we think about somebody gains knowledge, right? Jnata, somebody must gain knowledge and experience something. And somebody must be a karta who does something using some instruments. And the jnata uses a jnaya and then he has jnana. This karta using some karanam does some karma. So jnata and karta. Who is it? Jiva or the mind stuff? Tattvavada is very clear because Veda Vyasa has told us in Rachanadikaranam. Rachana anupapatteshta nanumanam pravrutteshta. Okay, this is my favorite sutra that actually is a master stroke that actually silences those monastic philosophers who actually say that the souls are inert and Brahman is inert. Good luck to them. It is the soul that is the doer. It is only the sentient conscious beings that do, not the mind. Srimadacharya gives, Yatra chetanatvam tatra kartrutvam, Yatra achetanatvam tatra kartrutva abhavaha, Yatra bhoktrutvam tatra kartrutvam, Yatra kartrutvam abhavaha tatra bhoktrutva abhavaha. Even by inference, we can understand it is the soul that is doing. Okay. You are pursuing me, giving this satsang talks, and we are all interacting and talking to each other. We, you and I, we are doing something. From Pratyaksha itself, we understand it is a sentient being that is doing. From Anumana, that is given by Srimad Acharya, we know that we are the doers. So sentiency equals doership. We see doership leading to enjoyments. Prakash ji.
Sudanji, this particular statement, ya kartritva bhava tattva bhoktritva bhava, if you use that statement, is it only relevant only in the pre-moksha realm, or in the moksha you don't do anything, you enjoy, still you have the enjoyment? So is it in reference only to the that is laukika, I mean the worldly thing before going to moksha, or is it at both the places?
Thank you very much, Prakash. Very interesting point. So this kartrutva of jiva is everywhere. Sentiency of jiva is everywhere, and it applies everywhere. It applies to ihaloka and it also applies to paraloka. So where the sentient jivas, even in paraloka or in moksha sthiti, they're still doing lots of actions. That is according to certain Tattvavada. Jivas are very active there. They are still different from Paramatma. They're meeting their friends and relatives there. They're talking Brahma Sutra. They are still discussing Vedas. They're still worshipping Paramatma who is there in Vaikunta. So there is still that difference, isn't it, everywhere? And there that Bhoktrutva, Kartrutva still holds true, and Paramatma is still controlling them. So it is everywhere. So that becomes very important here about the action or doership of the souls. So we have to accept this. If we cannot accept this, and if we say just it's the mind that is the doer, it is hugely problematic for our monastic philosophers because of this verse here in Divyadhyadikaranam. Vedavyasa says, Vedavyapadeshat Prakaranat. Look at the contextual relevance. What is going on here? There is somebody who is hitting a target. There is this bow and arrow. So there itself, there is a difference. Look at the whole context of the Mundaka Upanishad and so on. So that is what Vyasa is saying. Veda Vyapadesha, there is difference. I don't know how folks can bring, some kind of a unity here. It's very, very difficult to bring this. Okay. So stay with me on this. Why we are discussing this? Yasmin Dyau Prithvi cha Antariksham Votam Manaha Saha Pranashta Sarve. So this is what we need to understand, because some folks, once they start reading the Vedas, Upanishads and stuff, sometimes the ego comes in. Oh, I am a very knowledgeable person. Oh, I am doing these upasanas. I am doing this satsang. Nobody else is doing it. Look at these people going to the cinema theater. They are not doing satsang. All those egos set in. Once the ego set in, you are finished. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful to actually understand who is the doer. Okay, we have done this a million times here. This is the Jiva Kartrutva that we have to understand. Can we do any of these actions independently? That is the question here. We are lifting up this bow, we are placing this arrow, we are pulling the string, and we are hitting the target. Any of these actions, assuming the jivas do the actions, that is, we have all agreed that the jiva is doing the action. Now the next level question is, can we do any of these actions independently? Jiva Kartrutva. Who wants to give us a brief glimpse of what Jiva Kartrutva could be? And then we move to the next slide, which basically settles the whole Karma Yoga concept. If we understood Jiva Kartrutva, we have understood the Karma Yoga as our teachers teach us. Okay, let's do the Jiva Kartrutva. Anand, yeah, go for it.
So like we said earlier, the individual souls do have the doership, but they do not have the independence. Hence, they have a dependent doership, whereas Lord Almighty has doership as well as the independence. That probably sums up the Jiva Kartrutva.
Okay, thank you, Anandji. So my then question is, if it is the Paramatma who is the independent controller of all the actions of the Jiva, why is that Paramatma not making all the people out there on the Sunday afternoon, morning and evening to pick up that bow and arrow and do Upanishad Chintana? Why some folks did and some folks don't? Why is that happening? If Paramatma is independently controlling this, why is Paramatma not making all the souls follow the path of Shreyas? But only 9.00% of us do it. Yeah, who wants to go? Neetaji?
Swabhava. It's a nature, innate nature of the soul. Depending on that, God does that. So some people who has that innate nature, God propels them in that direction.
Thank you, Prakashji. Neetaji, did you have something to comment?
No, I was going to say the same thing. Swabhava.
So, fantastic.
And the prayatna, so you have the prayatna and the prarabdha karma and the swabhava, all three together place for the jiva kartrutva to act one way.
Brilliant answer, Pratibhaji. So all of us contributed excellent points there. So this is what we need to have. Even when this jiva is using the sadhana sharira and holding this bow called the Upanishad and then focusing the mind called the arrow and hitting it towards the Paramatma, we have to be very cautious and understand what is this kartrutva of me who is there in the sadhana sharira. And then, of course, it's a famous topic of Tattvavada. And many Upanishads deal with it. We don't have time to go for this, but there are sessions that we have done, right? So Jiva is a doer. Yeah, let's not forget. Jiva is a doer. Isha Upanishad second mantra. Kurvanneve iha kuru karmani. Jijiji vishet shatang samaha. So the Veda says do work. Kurvan eva iha karmani. Karmani, do the action. Of course, how you do it is where the problem is. Kuruvan eve iha kuru karmani is the whole karma yoga that we can discuss, but Veda say do actions. There are nisheda, there is what should be done, what should not be done, is all discussed in the Vedas for who?
Vanneva karmani jijivishecchatah samah evam tvaye anyate asti akarmalipyate nara.
Hare, thank you, Prakash ji. Yes, so the issue there is the Vedas have said Jiva has to do some actions. There are some actions that are prohibited. There are some actions that are encouraged in the Vedas. That itself says that the Jivas do something. Okay, so that is very, very clear from the Vedas itself. Karta Shastrartavatvad Brahma Sutra. Yeah, this is very, very Karta Adhikaranam is foundational for Karma Yoga. Karta. Jivas do karta, shastrartavatvad. In all the shastras, there is nisheda, there is what should be done is all said. That means jiva does. But jiva is also a non-doer. Because the jiva is what? Jiva is like a reflection, right? Bimba is this Paramatma. Whatever the Paramatma does, whatever the object does, the image moves. Yeah. So in that sense, whatever Brahman does, the Jiva does. So what is there for the Jiva? Jiva is not a doer in this equation. It is just a puppet. It is only the Paramatma who is doing it. That is also another view. Jiva is a non-doer. So how do you reconcile this? Veda Vyasa again says, Yatacha taksho ubayata. Like how a carpenter. Take the example of a carpenter. That is the Jiva Kartrutva. A skilled carpenter working for an employer is of course an agent within the means at his disposal. At the same time, he is bound to act by the employer in respect of any alteration or modification what he has to do. In the same way, Jiva A is an agent in one sense, a dependent one in the other. So that is the important. If you go to Sistine Chapel in Rome, you see this, right? This is Bimba Pratibimba Bhava relationship, dependence and independence. This is the philosophy of the Catholicism, which goes directly to the Rig Veda. Rupam rupam pratirupo babuva tadasya rupam pratichakshanaya indro maya bihi purarupayete yukta hi ester harayaha shatadasha. Check that verse out. We have done this before. So doership of Jiva is important. Jiva is a doer, but a dependent doer. He is a non-doer in the sense he is not an independent doer. He is a dependent doer. So why is this important? Because in this verse, Angirasa reminds us, look, that person, that Omkara, that Antaryamin, actually is the controller of your manas and all the indriyas, which is your sadhana sharira to start this paroksha jnana upasa. So the higher contemplation there is, see hand of God in everything. Everything is his gift. Every act is his act. We must see him in all. God's ownership and agency in all. So he has to give his grace so that we jivas can enact our swabhava so that we can hold this particular bow and arrow and start having a dhyana yuddha with him. So this is where our teachers tell us, our gurus tell us, this is the peculiarity of this particular sadhana, that this Paramatma himself has to prompt this jiva to have this yuddha with him. Okay, so we have to see that God in everything, and I think we should be very grateful for the grace that Paramatma is showering upon us, that over the last 5 years, we have managed to come together every Sunday afternoon to have these kind of contemplations. So that itself to me indicates there is an element of grace that is involved here, and we should never forget that, and we should be grateful for that particular, grace that God has bestowed upon us. So, and again, this is what we asked, is it, but why is God making everyone take this path of sadhana? Why only some? Is he partial? Is he cruel? So all that is kind of settled by this Adrushya Niyaman. And as Pratibhaji so beautifully mentioned, Jiva Swabhava, which Prakashji and Anandji mentioned, Anadi Karma and Purushakya Prayatna. It is based on these three rules that Paramatma allows the Jivas to work out their salvation. Okay. So if, for example, we are holding this Dhanus and this arrow and targeting to Paramatma, it is because we are doing Purushakya Prayatna now. We are coming, dedicating ourselves to every Sunday to sit and think about these problems. And why are we here? We are here because we must have done some good karma in the past, or even in this particular Janma itself, we have done some karma, good karma. Why did we do that good karma? Because of our Jiva Swabhava. Okay. So it's a very, very deep level of devotion to Paramatma, and say, look, for me to pray you also, I need your grace. Yeah. So please bless me so that I can do this. Why? Because Otam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi. Okay. So that becomes very important here, because I thought this is very relevant in chapter 1133. Is it when Krishna says Nimitta Matram Bhava Savyasachan? In this war, where you have to hold this bow and arrow, Arjuna, you're going to fight against all these enemies, right? You're going to hold this bow and arrow. Even you holding this bow and arrow is not actually in your control. I am the ultimate controller of everything. I do it based on your Jiva Swabhava, your Anadi Karma and Purushakya Prayatna. You are just a Nimitta. That is the philosophy of that Nimitta Matram Bhava Savyasachan. Okay, I hope that makes it interesting. So now I've also done these verses. The Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi. Anybody wants to recite this? It's a beautiful set of verses. Let's just do 424. Who wants to do 424? Neetaji, go for it.
ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्म हविः ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्म कर्म समाधिना.
Thank you, Neetaji. So even in that is in 4. Then you look at 9th chapter. Aham Kratur, Aham Yajnaha, Swada, Aham Moshadam. He says, I am this, I am that. So the understanding there is, see hand of God in everything. When this particular says, I am every component of this yajna that is going on, doesn't mean he is this components. He doesn't mean he is the spoon, he is the kunda, he is this. No, he is in everything. Yeah, so that is the understanding of that particular verse. I just thought I'll just put it in, but we don't have time to discuss that in full detail. So the fundamental point that we have to understand is that Dhyana Yuddha needs his grace. Okay. So we have to be very, very cautious of this Dhyana Yuddha that gives us Paroksha Jnana, because haughtiness, ego, everything sets in when people do this. And if that comes in, our sadhana is gone. So if we remind ourselves that even this Dhyana Yuddha needs his grace, I am just a Nimitta Matram, then our humility will remain the same. And our approach to this Paramatma as he is the master, I am his servant, remains intact. So that is very important in this Paroksha Jnana, Aparoksha Jnana journey that we are taking at this point. And then I want to finish today's session with this wonderful second half of this verse. And he says, tam yeva ekam janata atmanam anyavacho vimunchada amrutasya esha setuhu. So he says, tameva ekam janata. So let's come to that in a minute. Know him alone and nothing else. All other things are purposeless, Angirasa. Understand this fundamental truth is what Angirasa is teaching. Know him alone. Why is he saying that? If, for example, if you go to the very first verse of Mundaka Upanishad, if you go to the first Mundaka, first Adhyaya, what happened? Shuanaka approaches Angirasa and says, Shaunako havai mahashalo Angirasam vidivat upasannaha papracha. Kasminnu bhagave vijnatam vijnato sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati. Kasminnu bhagavo vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati. That was the question that actually started this philosophy. What did Shuanaka ask there? Revered sir, by knowing what? The knowledge of all that I know now will be meaningful and purposeful. Okay? We can apply to that to all our professional lives, whatever it is that we may be doing. We may want to ask Angirasa this question. Revered sir, by knowing what? The knowledge of all that I know now will be meaningful and purposeful. That is how humble that Shuanaka approached Angirasa for this question. And what is Angirasa saying here? Tameva ekam janata atmanam anyavacho munjata. Leave all other talk. Just think about this atmanam. Tameva eva ekam janata atmanam anyavacho vimunchata. Amrutasya esha setu. Why should we leave all other useless talk, but only focus on this guy? Why? Because in the next verse he says, Amrutasya esha setu. That is why you need to leave all others. We'll come to that in a minute. Contrast that with our Shvetaketu, who goes to Uddalaka right after the 12 years of all the Vedic learning. He goes Stabdayaya, standing like a pillar. And his dad Uddalaka Aruni. Notice that ego, which is what we should not be having. This fellow went to this Vedic school, Gurukula, to learn about the Vedas, to know about Paroksha Jnana, but that Paroksha Jnana actually made him egoistic. Yeah, and he was standing there like a pillar. What did Uddalaka ask? Yena ashrutam shrutam bhavati, amatam matam, avijnatam vijnatam iti. Knowing, have you heard about that? Hearing of which means you've heard everything. Thinking of which means you have thought about anything. Knowledge of which means you know that you have the knowledge of everything. Our friend Shvetaketu was dumbstruck and he couldn't answer. And so the chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad, moved forward to give us the concept of who this Atma is. Okay. So here, coming back to this, to answer that fundamental question, Angirasa talks about all the Paroksha Jnana, Aparoksha Jnana, Upanishads and Pranava Vidya and says, no, only this Atmanam. Tam eva ekam. Look at this. Eva eka janata. This only one entity you need to know. Anyavacho vimunchata. Don't waste time in other things. Give up useless talk. Don't waste your time going through these useless parties, sitting around and talking nothing, just eating and coming back and wasting away our time. Particularly, it becomes interesting in our phases of life. I don't know how long we have. Are we interested in just eating some nonsense and talking some nonsense in an evening in somebody's house and coming back? Or are we going to be constantly pursuing this material wealth and accumulating this, not just for us, but for 7 generations to come, our children, grandchildren, and so on? For what? It is not going to take us to liberation. Is what Angirasa wants us to think about. Think about Paravidya. And he said that in the very first Mundaka, isn't it? Tasmai sahovacha dvevidye veditavye itihasma yad brahmavido vadanti parachaiva aparacha. Tatra apara rigvedo yajurvedaha samavedo atharvavedaha siksha kalpo vyakaranam niruktam chando jyotishamiti atha para yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. Focus on knowledge, learn the Vedas properly so that you understand this akshara, who is this Atmanam. So look at the word Atmanam itself is very important, isn't it? Etymology of Atma, we have done this so many times. Atatatvacha matrutvad atmahi paramoharihi is one. Atata ma means matra, matra means tanmatra, all pervasive and is all pervasive in everywhere in the universe, which is what this particular verse is talking about. Yasmin dyau prithvi cha antariksham cha otam manaha saha pranaishcha sarvaihi. And then relevantly he has used the word Atma here. Purusha Shukta, Tameva Vidvan Amruta Iha Bhavati, Na Anyaha Pantaha Ayanaya Vidyate. Knowing this entity only will lead you to Amruta. Tam Evam Vidvan Amruta Iha Bhavati. Okay. So this is what Angirasa is stressing very, very, very carefully, and we have to take him very seriously. If our rishis constantly say this, both Uddalaka, Angirasa, and so many other rishis like Raikwa, etc., they all talking about the same thing. Give up useless talk. Paravidya may give you some material comforts, but it stops there. Use that material comforts to keep your sadhana sharira healthy. And with the sadhana sharira, follow the analogy of the bow and arrow, go towards paroksha jnana, and aparoksha jnana would be a clever way of doing it. Why? Give up all works. Tameva kam janata atmanam anya vacho vimunchata. Why we have to focus only on this particular thing? Okay. The first half of our lives, we have spent going to the school, to the university, to find a career, to find a profession, to make money, to make salary, have a house, whatever. Is it going to come when we are either burnt and our ashes in this pot, or if you are going to be buried in the ground 6 feet by 4 inches, or a small little pot with our ash, which is going to be put in some water and the ash is dissolved? Okay. But anything that we have made is going to come with us. No, it's only the knowledge of the Antaryamin that will actually give you the final solution, says Angirasa. Amrutasya yesha setuhu. Amruta. And that is a very important concept. Maybe another 10 minutes, we'll dwell on this and close today's session. Amruta. Amrutasya yesha setuhu. Amruta. What is Amruta? A plus Mruta. Mruta means what? Death. Okay. This is what happens to all of us. As I said, we will be in this pot in an ash. That is what is going to happen to all of us. I don't know when it's going to happen. 100% it's going to happen. We are all going to get into this pot where we have a handful of ash. That is all is going to remain of this sadhana sharira. And that is what happened in Aranya Parva, right? When the Yaksha came and he asked all those questions. And he asked this question, right? Kim Ashcharyaha? This Yaksha asked Yudhishthira. There, if most of you know this particular incident. Kim Ashcharyaha? What is the most wonderful? This Yaksha asked Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira gives one of the most profound philosophies. Ahanya bhutani gachanti iha yamalayam sheshaha stavaram ichanti kim ashcharyam ataha param. Yudhishthira says, every day we see people dying. Either they are buried or they are burnt and they are in this pot in the ash. We see this every day. People going to the Yama Alayam, they go to the Yamaloka. But person who is witnessing this thinks that this is not going to happen to him. He is not going to die. He is going to be here forever. Is what this fellow who is in this sadhana sharira is. Every human being thinks that. That is the most wonderful thing Yudhishthira says, and the Yaksha is very impressed with that answer. But none of us think about this. We just think that we are going to be here forever. Look at this sad state of us. Who wants to take up 227, which is very relevant for today's discussion? Any takers for 227, please? Anand, go for it.
Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mrutasya cha tasmad apariharyerthe natvam shochidum arhasi.
Beautiful, Anandji. Thank you. So here, Yaksha and Yudhishthira, they had a different perspective of this conversation. But in chapter 227, Krishna gives a different perspective of what? The fellow who dies will be born again. The fellow who is born will die again. So what is inevitable is going to happen. So why do you want to make a big fuss about it, Arjuna? It's one of the arguments. And then he builds the philosophy of course, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu. Jatasya means to be born. Dhruva means 100%. What? Mrityu. Dhruvam Janma, and 100% he is going to be born again. So we are going through this cycle, isn't it, of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. Endless birth and death, full of suffering. Forget about those people who think that their being here is great joy. Maybe to some people, but it's a very transient thing. So the philosophy there is, why do you want to do this Antaryami investigation of this Antaryami and see him and so on, is at some point, this thing has to come to us, that this is a transient thing. This body will die and we'll be born again. Do we really need to go through it? So the answer there is, if you want to attain Amruta, Amruta means deathlessness. Okay. So if one has to attain deathlessness, then the key point there is, one should aim for not being born again in the samsara. So that is a very, very important. Think about this concept of Vedantic philosophy. If you don't want to die, you should not be born. Because if you're born in samsara, you're 100% bound to die. Because jatasya dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Yeah. So we should go towards that point where we are not going to be born again. Okay. And we will not be born again when we don't have any karmic imprints. As long as we have karma, we are going to be born again and again. What we are aiming for is to get rid of this karmic imprints. How are we going to get rid of this karmic imprints? By having aparoksha jnana. So that is how this whole thing, each verse is relevant for the other one. If you want to attain this amrutasya, you have to do all this. How to attain this deathlessness? Not to be born again. How is this possible? By eradicating karmic imprints. How is this possible? By aparoksha jnana. How is aparoksha jnana possible? After obtaining paroksha jnana and divine grace. How is this paroksha jnana possible? Study of the scriptures. Which ones? Vedas and so many other things, that 7 scriptures that we have spoken about with rules as per Brahma Sutra. But this is the whole sequence of journey of souls that Angirasa talks about. Isn't it? Paramatmano atyanta binnasya swataha chidananda atma kasyapi jivasya anadi avidya kama karmadi nimitto ayam paramartata eva anyatakaaraha dukkadi anartaha na parameshwara prasadat rute apagacchati nacha asakshat kruto aso prasidati. Without aparoksha jnana, there is no scope for anything. That aparoksha jnana is what Angirasa has been talking so much over the last several weeks. This is so beautifully described by Jayatirtha. Okay. So this Amrita...
Madhu, on a lighter note, modern days, it can also achieved by joining Hindu Knowledge Academy.
Absolutely true, Srinivasan, Sudarshan Avargale. So, yeah, so Tamevaikam Janata Atmanam Anyavacho Munjuta Amrutasya Yesha Setuhu. Esha is important. Esha means that which is an independent controller. That is Esha. Amrutasya Yesha Setuhu. This Esha is the bridge for your Amrutatva. For you to reach that deathlessness, which means not to be born again in this material world, this Paramatma, this Antaryamin is your bridge. Knowledge of the Akshara is the bridge, because that is the Paroksha Jnana that leads to Aparoksha Jnana. Okay. So this Isha is this Akshara. Knowledge of Akshara is the bridge. Akshara is the bridge. Somebody has to hold you and take you across, because you are such a dependent being. Even that Akshara has to do for you. His knowledge is the bridge. He is the bridge. And this Akshara will make us cross this samsara on to liberation, where Akshara is always there. Okay, so that is the beauty of Vimunjata Amrutasya Yesha Setuhu Yasmin Dyau Prithivicha Antariksham Otam Manaha Saha Pranaishta Sarvaihi Tam Eva Ekam Janata Atmanam Anya Vacho Vimunjata Amrutasya Yesha Setuhu. So after saying all this, then he brings us. So let me bring you back again. Where is he well established? That is another amazing metaphor that we'll pick it up in the next verse. Ara iva ratanabo samhata yatra nadyaha sa esha antascharate bahuda jayamanaha om ityevam dhyayata atmanam vai swastivaha paraya tamasas parastat. Araiva Ratanabo. That is an amazing philosophy that Angita then takes us. This Antaryamin is sitting inside you, but where is he in this sadhana sharira? And he takes this whole philosophy of nadis and chakras and so on, and brings it all together for us to understand. This guy is so important for you. If you think this body is the Ratha, and the Ratha has got this various components, where is he? So this is what we are going to be taking up in the next verse. And I hope you will join us in a fortnight to do this particular mantra of Mundaka Upanishad. And before we close today, Krishna Pranamastu, and a small announcement. Next week, we have our Gita Chintana, right? Don't forget, we've been doing Gita Chintana chapter 4. And we got the final section of chapter 4 Chintana of Gita Upanishad. And following that Chintana, we also have an external expert speaker, Meera Keshavrao Tadpatri from the US. Her her good self is going to be giving us an expert summary of the chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. So join us for next Sunday for what promises to be an amazing session from an expert speaker who is going to give us the overarching bird's eye view of what is the essence of the chapter 4. And of course, we have our leaders taking us through chapter 4 as well. So I will carry on with the Ratha, the Nadis and so on in about fortnight's time. Okay, so Krishna Pranamastu again. If there are any questions, we can take it up now or we close today's session. Fantastic. So no questions today. Thank you very much. So Anandji, do you want to take us through Omkara and we close today's session?
Okay. Oh.
Thank you, Madhu.
Hare Krishna. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Srinivasa, Hare Namah.
Hare Krishna, Hare Namah.